The reality of sex work for Mexican immigrant women in the early 1900s. The Life Story of the Mexican Immigrant, a collection of autobiographical documents assembled by Manuel Gamio, contains an account from a woman named Elisa Silva, who was a night dancer from Mazatlan, Sinaloa, who immigrated to the U.S. with her mother and two sisters. In this account made by Elisa, she describes her financial situation and the reasoning of why she decided to join the sex industry. Elisa explains the difficulty of finding a job in the U.S. as an immigrant woman who doesn't know any English or any helpful trade skills. She and her mother are sacrificing themselves so that her sister can get an education and hopefully get a good paying job to support the family. Her account highlights the period from 1910 to the 1930s, which was a difficult time for working class Mexican people who were driven out of their homes due to the high expense of living. This was especially a difficult time for working class women, and more specifically those whose only means of survival were to join the sex industry. The economy in Mexico at the time was a product of the Porfiriato, the 35-year dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz. In the scholarly article Prostitutes and Guardian Angels, Women, Work, and the Family in Porfirian Mexico, William E. French observes that during this time, middle-class Mexicans thought of prostitution as a conversation of morality and socioeconomic class. Mexico was set on providing an education for women solely to instill the values of motherhood. They thought that by teaching women domesticity, they would morph them into the perfect wives, ultimately driving them away from prostitution. French observes the way that the middle class considered a woman as honorable. At the time, women who were considered honorable despised prostitutes and considered them as gente baja, or low-class individuals. However, what they failed to recognize is that those who were able to stay in Mexico and receive an education were privileged in the sense that the state of the economy did not drive them out of their homes. These middle-class women were inherently the ones perceived as honorable. Unfortunately, not everyone had that luxury. This ties into another statement made by Elisa, where she describes night dancing as the best fit for her, as it is a good enough paying job that requires little to no skill. This was a common theme amongst Mexican immigrant women in the U.S. who often struggled with finding a good paying job due to their various identities or lack of qualification for jobs in the textile industry. In the scholarly thesis, The Case for Prostitution in El Paso, Texas, 1910 to 1929, written by Nancy Batista, she identifies the inequalities Mexican immigrant women faced. Batista points out how it was easy for men to find work in jobs such as agriculture, mining, and railroad construction, while women mostly found work in the textile industry. The textile industry did not pay as well as the male-dominated jobs did, making it almost impossible for women who solely depended on their single income to survive and support their families. Batista mentions how this left women and young girls in vulnerable positions. This idea is seen through the story of a 12-year-old girl Batista mentions. In order to support her siblings, this very young girl was willing to leave her home and come to the U.S. only to end up in prostitution. This shows us how different life was for these girls once they left their homes. In order to survive, they abandoned the lives they had in Mexico, much like this girl who was stripped from her childhood. In this statement, Elisa describes how many of these women had to abandon their own morals and respect to make ends meet. She suggests that she doesn't lose status in the place she calls home. Therefore, it does not matter as long as she's doing what she came to the U.S. to do, make money. Although people did come to the U.S. with economic goals, building sexual boundaries, the U.S.-Mexico border in the early 20th century, a research paper written by Marlene Medrano highlights how the U.S. economically benefited from prostitution. Medrano reveals how the U.S. used prostitution as a means for economic gain and border control, using morality and the safety of Americans to justify the racialized policing of Mexican women, a common theme for this time. Although this is the sad truth behind Mexican immigrant prostitution, it gives us an insight to the past and the various beliefs and values of individuals in both Mexico and in America during this time period. Mexican immigrant sex work is more than we may believe it is. Sex work is not only a symbol of disparity, but a symbol of women reclaiming their power and individuality. These women, like other immigrants at that time, did what they could with what they had. And I believe that this is the most powerful part about this topic.